Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please, have a seat. Giovanni, I know from experience it takes extraordinary courage for you to stand up here and retell your son's story. Many of you who have lost someone to gun violence. It's been a passion of mine for a long, long time. It's a reason way back, a long time ago, I authored the Violence Against Women Act, which no one thought made any sense at the time. I had a lot of trouble getting people to think we could make a difference. But the fact of the matter is, I remember well when you first started it with me, this extraordinary courage. You know, through your words, you help ensure that your son and all the victims of gun violence are not forgotten. They didn't die in vain. Through your love, you help prevent the next tragedy that saves lives. And through your actions, you remember us will never let go of one thing that we must never, never lose. And I mean this. I know it's hard because I've gotten those phone calls too saying I lost a son, a daughter, a wife. I know what it's like. But guess what? Never give up on hope. Hope, hope, hope. I give you my word, I know what that feels, that black hole when you receive that phone call. It seems like your black hole in your chest, you're being sucked into it. Just showing up here and all the work you've done takes some courage because it reminds you of the moment you got that phone call. It reminds you, no matter how long it goes. It's hard, but you're making such a difference. The main reason I'm here to say, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Folks, it's okay. Look, they care. Innocent children have been lost. They make a full point. Come on now.
Thank you for honoring gun violence survivors.
Folks, to every town and all the leaders and advocates here today, I want to thank you for the dedication to this vital issue you've shown. And to all the survivors, veterans, families, moms who have turned their pain and your purpose into the loss and you're determined to not focus on your anger, but on what you can do. Look, folks, you've helped power a movement that is turning this cause into reality, especially young people who demanded our nation do better to protect us all, who protested, who organized, who voted, who ran for office, and yes, who marched for their lives. From my perspective, today is about celebrating you. You're the reason I'm so optimistic about the future of our country, and I mean that. In 2 weeks, we'll mark the 2nd anniversary of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It's the most significant gun legislation in nearly 30 years. And we passed it only because you went out and worked like hell to get it done. You may have the idea, but you got it made. You made it happen. It was designed to reduce gun violence and save lives, and I'm so proud of the tremendous progress we made since then. You know, the year before I came to the presidency, the murder rate was the highest increase on record. Last year, we saw the largest decrease of murder in history of it. And those rates are continuing to fall faster than ever. Last year, we also saw one of the lowest rates of all violent crime in nearly 50 years. Murder, rape, aggravated assault, robbery, all dropped sharply, along with burglary and property crime. This matters. So much of this progress is because, and I'm not just trying to be solicitous, it's because of you. Don't underestimate what you've done. It's amazing what you've done. You've changed people's minds, your neighbors, your friends, the folks down at the restaurant, the folks at the grocery store. Through the American Rescue Plan, I was able to invest $15 billion, the largest investment ever to reduce crime. And we built on that progress with your help, the bipartisan. through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And here's how. First, the Act's helping reduce community violence and domestic violence. It invests $250 million in violence intervention programs all across the country. People are now, my daughter's a social worker working with violence against women. What people don't realize is these things matter. They change attitudes. We've already funded nearly 80 programs and counting. We also make gun trafficking and straw purchasing a federal crime for the first time, giving prosecutors a legal tool to charge traffickers and hold them accountable for the more severe penalties that are available. Additionally, the law strengthens background checks for anyone under the age of 21 trying to purchase a firearm. And it's about time. There's more we have to do there. It's a big deal. Since the law was passed and implemented, the FBI stopped more than 700 sales of firearms for individuals under the age of 21. And about 20,000 unlicensed firearms dealers are now required to become licensed to run background checks, which will keep guns out of dangerous hands. Second, the Act helps stop mass shootings. It provides $750 million to states to implement the crisis interventions, like red flag laws that temporarily remove firearms from those who are endangering themselves and others. It also gives $1.3 billion to thousands of schools across the country to build safer learning environments, including updating safety plans, installing security equipment, hiring mental health professionals and school resource officers. I'm married to a full-time teacher, I get it. As well as violent intervention teams. Folks, look, third, the Act invests over $1 billion, the largest one-time investment ever in youth mental health in our schools. Help them deal with grief and trauma resulting in gun violence. I've attended too many mass shootings. I've gone to too many schools across America and stood there and looked at the faces of those young children who made it, and look at all the families that lost somebody. It's tragic, but it needs help. They need help to get through it. It includes an additional 14,000 mental health professionals to be hired and trained in our schools, to work in our schools full time. That's 14,000 more. And over 170,000 Americans across the country have been trained to identify when someone is having a mental health crisis, connect them to the help they need. By the way, one of the reasons I wrote the latest veterans bill was because more veterans and more active duty personnel are dying of suicide than any combat zone. It matters. And folks, this historic law is already saving lives, but there's still so much more to do to maximize the benefits of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. That's why last September, I established the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I made it. We got first-rate professionals there and overseen by my incredible vice president. Who's a pretty fierce prosecutor as well. To drive and coordinate government and a nationwide effort to reduce gun violence in America. That's why we did it, and to send a clear message about how important this issue is to me, to you, and to the entire country. Folks, you're changing the nation. You really are. You're changing the nation. It builds upon the dozen of executive actions my administration has taken to reduce gun violence, more than any of my predecessors, and I suspect more than all of them combined. Everything from cracking down on ghost guns, gun trafficking, so much more. Folks, we're not stopping there. It's time, once again, to do what I did when I was a senator. Ban assault weapons. I mean it. God's name needs a magazine which can hold 200 shells? Nobody, that's right. I remember when I was campaigning, when I was a senator, going through the wetlands of Delaware to read all the people who were most upset with me, the fishermen and the hunters. And I came across a guy who was fishing, and he said, "You want to take my gun?" And I looked at him, I said, "Yeah, I don't want to take your gun. You're allowed to have a gun, but I want to take away your ability to use an assault weapon." And this is how the conversation went. He said, "What do you mean I need that gun?" I said, "Guess what? If you need 12 to 100 bullets in a gun, in a magazine, you're the lousiest shot I've ever heard of." I'm serious. And to his credit, he looked at me and said, "You have a good point." But think about it. They're weapons of war. And by the way, it's time we establish universal background checks. And by the way, and require the safe storage of firearms. We should hold families responsible if they don't provide those locks on those guns. If in fact, because 3 of these major crime scenes I've visited were ones where the mother or father left open, left the stuff out on the desk, left it out on the table, and the kid came and used it. And by the way, this is most important. The only industry in America that has immunity are gun dealers. We got to end it. End it now. No, I mean it. Imagine if we gave tobacco an exception, they could not be prosecuted. What would happen? We'd still, 1,000 more people would be dying of cancer because of smoke inhalation. It's time to increase funding for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives and other law enforcement agencies as well, to solve the crimes faster. Look, unfortunately, it's the only partisan thing I'm going to say. The congressional Republicans oppose all of these, every one of these. Instead of trying to stop our ban on ghost gun kits that contain these, that commit crimes, they're working like hell to stop it. They want to abolish the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, which is responsible for fighting gun crimes. You can't be pro-law enforcement and say you are pro-law enforcement and be pro-abolishing the AFT. You can't do it. It's outrageous. I disagree with some of my own party and on the other side about a lot of things, but at least there's some rational argument they have as part of their argument. What in God's name is the rationale for taking away the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms? After a school shooting in Iowa that killed a student and a teacher, my predecessor was asked about it. You remember what he said? He said, "Have to get over it." Hell no, we don't have to get over it. We got to stop it. We got to stop it and stop it now. More children are killed in America by guns than cancer and car accidents combined. My predecessor told the NRA convention recently, he's proud that, quote, "I did nothing on guns when I was president. And by doing nothing, he made the situation considerably worse." That's why every town, why this summit, why all of you here today are so damn important. We need you. We need you to overcome the unrelenting opposition of the gun lobby, gun manufacturers, so many politicians when they oppose common sense gun legislation. I used to be when I was no longer the vice president, I became a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Before that, I taught a constitutional law class, and so I taught the Second Amendment. There's never been a time that says you can own anything you want. You couldn't own a cannon during the Civil War. No, I'm serious. Think about it. How many times have you heard this phrase? The blood of liberty washes those. Give me a break. No, I mean it, seriously. And by the way, if they want to think to take on government if we get out of line, which they're talking again about, well, guess what? They need F-15s. They don't need a rifle. Folks, look, this is crazy what we're talking about. Because whether we're Democrats or Republicans, we want our families to be safe. We all want to drop them off at a house of worship, a mall, a movie theater, a school, without worrying it's the last time I'm going to get to see them. We all want. We all want our kids to have the freedom to learn how to read and write in schools instead of learn how to duck and cover, for God's sake. And above all, we all agree, we are not finished. Look, no single action can solve the entirety of the gun violence epidemic, but together, our efforts, your efforts, are saving lives. You can help rally a nation with a sense of urgency and seriousness of purpose. You're changing the culture. And we've proven we can do more than just thoughts and prayers. Just more than thoughts and prayers. You're changing politics. You're proving that you're powerful and you're relentless, and I mean that. Let me close with this. I know many people here have been impacted by gun violence and are tired and frustrated. I know. I've been to too many. I've literally spoken with well over 1,000 families at these events that I've attended, mass shootings. And look in their eyes. You can almost feel that black hole they feel in the center of their chest, like they're being sucked in. There's no way out. If they have remaining children, you look at the children and they wonder, Mommy, Daddy, how about me? And I know you may wonder, are we ever going to make full progress that we need to make? I'm here to tell you, we have no choice. We cannot give up trying. For all the lives lost and all those who are still there to save, we're going to get there. I have no illusions about how difficult it may be, but I also have no illusions about the people in this room. You're changing the attitude of the public. I really mean, I'm going back to why I got here in the first place. That is to say thank you. I can come up with all these ideas about the laws we can change to make it easier. But you're changing people's lives. You're convincing your neighbors and people this is necessary. It's beginning to move. Look what we've already done around the community. Look at the movement you've built, the elected officials standing with you. Look at all the mothers' organizations across the country.
Mr. President, you are making a change too. I love you so much and God.
Look, when there's a crisis, half what people affected by a crisis have to know is anybody listening? Do you hear me? Do they hear what we're saying? Listen to the young people who are speaking out. That's the power of the memory of your loved ones. That's the power of this movement. That's the power of America. We just have to keep going and keep the faith. Remember who we are. We are the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity when we act and do it together. So God bless you all, and may God protect your truth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep it up.
All right, everybody, we have been watching President Biden deliver remarks in Washington on his administration's efforts on gun control, walking off to the song I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty. The president touted his administration's gun control legislation passed nearly 2 years ago. We're going to put up a graphic to show you what that did. It included enhanced background checks for gun buyers under 21 years of age, billions of dollars for health services, closed the so-called boyfriend loophole, but the president said there is still more to be done. He said, quote, "We are not finished." He advocated for the banning of assault weapons, called them weapons of war, advocated for universal background checks and safe storage laws, and called out congressional Republicans and his predecessor for opposing that legislation. Notably, the president did not address his son Hunter's conviction on 3 federal gun charges today. Let's bring in CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, we know the White House had released a statement, and notably also, he was heckled a bit. Somebody in the crowd shouted he was complicit in genocide. The crowd booed. Sort of the confluence of issues right now that are confronting this president.
Yeah, a bit of an afternoon for him, perhaps, as he's reminded again of that ongoing conflict in the Middle East as well. No mention of Hunter Biden's verdict earlier today. Perhaps that's expected. We got the written statement earlier today when, let's remind people, he said in part, I am the president, but I'm also a dad. Jill and I love our son, and we are so proud of the man he is today. And later adding that I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. And knowing the attorney that Joe Biden is, he probably is seeking to say as little as possible publicly unless or until his son decides what to do about an appeal. And then continue to reserve judgment in public, at least verbally or on camera, until that process is concluded, because, of course, he does oversee the Justice Department, which, of course, is the one prosecuting his son. He is now expected to head to the Joint Base Andrews outside Washington to fly Air Force One back to Delaware to be with the rest of his family, who is up there in the hours after this verdict. He was scheduled to stay here through tomorrow and then go from here to Italy for the G7 conference. It now looks like he's going to go back to Delaware for the night, come back to Joint Base Andrews tomorrow, hop on the bigger Air Force One and head to Europe for G7 meetings that come amid reports that Hamas, for example, may have just responded to the proposed ceasefire and hostage swap deal. So there's obviously things for him to be worried about on the day job, in addition to this absolute family tragedy, one of the lowest personal moments of his time as president, certainly in the last 3.5, 4 years or so, Lindsay. So we will see if he has anything more to say when he heads for the airport or for the airbase in a little bit. But otherwise, looks like they're trying to keep him on message and to some extent focused on the official job, while also, of course, being a father concerned for his son.
You had mentioned Wilmington, so let's go over to senior CBS White House correspondent Weijia Jiang, who's in Wilmington, Delaware. Weijia, the last time we spoke, you mentioned that the entire White House press corps would be looking for opportunities to ask the president for a response on camera. As Ed mentioned, we have that written response. Do you imagine that in the coming hours, as he goes to Wilmington, that reporters will have the opportunity to do that?
Well, Lindsay, there is a traveling press pool that travels with President Biden, and so there could be opportunities for reporters to try. But clearly, this was a very careful, calculated decision for the president not to say something. And once he has decided that, along with his team of advisors, it's difficult to see that he will budge for the very reasons that Ed laid out, because this is not over yet. And he has said before that he does not want to comment on any ongoing case, certainly that of his sons, but he could, if he wanted to, off the cuff, say something about the fact that he loves and he supports his son Hunter, which is what was provided in that written statement. So he is coming here to Wilmington, Delaware, and he will spend the night here with his family. You can imagine what a difficult chapter this is for them, and they are extremely close. So, of course, it makes sense that he would want to come here as quickly as possible to be physically with his son. In that speech, Lindsay, that he just made, I thought it was really interesting that not only did he not mention the verdict as he was talking about gun control, but he also talked about the fact that he understands what it is like to lose a child, referencing Hunter's brother, Beau. And we know from this trial that it was Beau's death that sort of sent Hunter Biden spiraling. And we know that from his memoir as well. And so you have these two huge elephants in the room that the president, again, made a very clear decision not to address as he tries to, do his job as president.
And we have mentioned the changes in the schedule today. And Weijia, it's also notable that there's no White House press briefing. What can you tell us about that?
That's right. There was a White House press briefing on the original schedule, but then when it was updated to include the president's new movements here to Wilmington, Delaware, that press briefing was no longer on the schedule. And it could be because he is not physically at the White House and they don't want to have it. But we really haven't gotten a clear answer, and certainly have pushed back to the White House about, being available to answer the many questions that reporters have today, not only about this verdict, but as Ed mentioned, about many things abroad as well, including a potential deal for a ceasefire and the release of hostages, especially since he is leaving for a huge international summit tomorrow morning. Reporters had a lot of questions about the G7. And so that briefing will not happen. We should mention, though, that John Kirby, who is also a spokesperson for the White House, the National Security Council, did have an off-the-camera availability to answer questions with reporters.
Okay, so bouncing off of that, Ed, this grueling schedule that the president is going to embark on, really already has embarked on since he's already been abroad this month. What can you tell us about really the next few weeks here, just in June alone?
Well, he, remember, just got back Sunday night from a 5-day state visit to France, was in Wilmington most of yesterday, came back last night for an event here, a Juneteenth-related event, and then the verdict came down this morning, and he was scheduled to give this speech that he just finished up before. The plan was to keep him here through tomorrow morning and then have him fly to Italy for the G7, where he's set to hold meetings on Thursday and Friday, but then on Friday fly overnight, through the night, across the United States, all the way to Los Angeles, for an event Saturday for his reelection campaign that's poised to raise 8 figures for the effort. And he'll be joined in that fundraiser with former President Barack Obama, George Clooney, Julia Roberts, Jimmy Kimmel, other Hollywood luminaries as they try to bankroll his ongoing reelection. In the meantime, the vice president is set to sit in for the president at a conference that's set to be held Saturday in Switzerland regarding the future of Ukraine's war effort. President Zelensky had invited President Biden to come from the G7 summit in Italy to Switzerland for that, but he couldn't because of this massive fundraiser they're holding. And so then we'll come back from Los Angeles towards the East Coast, and at some point next week is expected to begin formal preparations for his debate on June 27th with former President Donald Trump. So it's going to be a mix of whatever events are going on, but then otherwise probably very little public events for the president after this big week that he's facing. With his trip to Europe and then to the West Coast. And we'll see from there where things go and how the campaign rolls along.
Okay, Ed and Rija, thank you for that update. I want to, if we have it available, play a little bit of what Special Counsel David Weiss said earlier today about the case involving Hunter Biden and the reason that so many reporters do want to talk to President Biden in the wake of Hunter Biden's conviction. Let's listen.
Good afternoon. My name is David Weiss. I'm special counsel. Earlier today, Hunter Biden was convicted of 2 counts of lying on a form submitted to a federal firearms dealer about his addiction or use of crack cocaine and possessing a firearm while a user or addict. There have been 2 overarching themes emphasized by the prosecution during trial: this defendant's illegal choices and the rule of law. First, while there has been much testimony about the defendant's abuse of drugs and alcohol, ultimately this case was not just about addiction, a disease that haunts families across the United States, including Hunter Biden's family. This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction, his choice to lie on a government form when he bought a gun, and the choice to then possess that gun. It was these choices and the combination of guns and drugs that made his conduct dangerous. Second, no one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant. However, Hunter Biden should be no more accountable than any other citizen convicted of this same conduct. The prosecution has been and will continue to be committed to this principle and to the principles of federal prosecution in carrying out its responsibilities. I want to thank the jury for their service. There are few civic responsibilities more important than jury service. 15 Delawareans came to court each day and performed their responsibilities in a professional and conscientious manner. We thank them. I want to thank Derek Hines, Leo Wise, and the entire special counsel team. I am so proud of this group of attorneys, agents, and litigation professionals. This is a difficult assignment. These folks have been working 7 days a week for the last couple months, litigating a variety of issues in district and appellate courts on 2 coasts. They have given their heart and soul to this work.
Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. So, Jessica, that was obviously earlier today, but we've had a few hours now to sort of digest the verdict and what happened. When you reflect back on what happened earlier today, what are your biggest takeaways for folks?
My biggest takeaway is that this was a strong prosecution and that I think the system worked once this case was charged and went to trial as intended, in the sense that the charges here were fairly straightforward. Did Hunter Biden lie on a federal form saying that he was not a user of illegal drugs when in fact he was? And did he therefore unlawfully possess a gun? Because there's a federal law prohibiting narcotics users from possessing a gun. I think the defense did about as good as they possibly could have, saying that the form was unclear, that Hunter Biden may not have been using drugs at that time, and that the definition of the term addict was left open to interpretation. But given the speed with which we got that verdict, I mean, when we spoke this morning, as we all have discussed, a quick verdict is good for the prosecution. And that's my big takeaway, which is there weren't big surprises. Frankly, if this decision had gone the other way, I think we would be having a different conversation about what the jury was seeing in that courtroom.
Forgive me if you're not fully aware, because I'm not fully aware of the term knowingly. Scott McFarland and I yesterday was sort of talking about this yesterday, and the word knowingly, correct me if I'm wrong, was omitted from the jury instructions. And how significant do you think that was, considering that Hunter Biden's main defense was that he didn't consider himself an addict at that time? So the fact that he, do you think he lied, or do you think he knowingly lied? How significant do you think the omission of that word would be?
So what I will say is that whenever the prosecution has to show some form of intent, whether it be knowledge or intent, then that is more difficult for the prosecution. But in this case, what they had to show was a false statement. Now, the defense tried to say before jury instructions and throughout the trial that you needed this element of knowledge or intent. But I think obviously it is helpful for the prosecution if you just have to show a false statement as opposed to a knowingly false statement. This is one of those things that frankly we argue about in the law all the time. What is the applicable level of intent here? What mindset do you need to show? And so I think that while it might not have been outcome determinative, it could have been the reason we had that verdict so quickly.
I want to ask you about the federal tax case that Hunter Biden still faces out of California, likely in September, and whether this conviction has any bearing on that. I know they're separate cases. Originally, they were lumped into the same plea agreement that fell apart, but we know that any prospective juror doesn't know they're a juror yet in that case. They have access to the news, so it's not like they'll live in a vacuum and not know that Hunter Biden now is a convicted felon.
Right. And we don't need jurors to live in a vacuum, and we don't need jurors who don't have any political views or who have never heard of Hunter Biden. What we need are jurors who understand exactly what you said to your, very smart question, which is they're separate cases. The defendant is the same. They're both federal cases. They both involve that plea agreement that fell apart. And as far as I can see, the similarities really end there. We're talking about tax evasion versus gun possession. We're talking about failure to pay at the time those taxes, as opposed to false statements on federal forms. So there is a reason that those particular charges have been decoupled, so to speak. There's a reason that they will go forward in different jurisdictions at different times. There's a reason that there wasn't one trial that bundled together both charges. And so for the jury, yes, they're going to be aware of it, but one of the key things for a jury, and we just talked about the importance of jury instructions, is to look only at the facts presented with respect to the case they are looking at.
Jessica Levinson, thank you. And we do have much more news still ahead on CBS News 24/7, including 4 Americans recovering from a stabbing attack in China. What we're learning about the victims and the suspect. Plus, House Republicans are looking to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. We'll discuss where those efforts stand. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.